What is going on, kings and queens of this wonderful wonderland that we call YouTube? So I just recently was able to sit down and have a little bit of fun with Dead by Daylight, so I thought it'd be kind of cool to go through and kind of rank the killers of the game from my least favorite to, of course, my favorite. Before we get into that, though, I just want to put out a couple disclaimers here. The first of which being that I didn't play the survivor portion of the game. I didn't experience the killers through the survivor's eyes, if you will. I just went through, played each of the killers, and then made this video. Yeah. And the second disclaimer would be that I didn't sit down and try and grind and level up each of the characters to max level. So the killers that I'm going to be describing to you and my experiences revolve around the stock killers that the game gives you. So I don't know from firsthand experience if there's any unlockables or perks or anything that changes your experience with the killer. But I didn't do any of that. So the killers that we're going to be discussing in this video are just the stock killers that the game gives you. So without further ado, let's get into this ranking countdown video, whatever you want to call it, with number 6, and my least favorite killer of Dead by Daylight, the nurse. Now, I think the main reason that I didn't like the nurse is there doesn't seem to be a lot to her. There's not, I like feeling like there's a little bit of weight to my character, and like I could do some damage when I swing my weapon or whatever, and that's basically in any game. I just like the big, in-your-face type characters. And the nurse wasn't like that, she floats around, and she swings this bone saw type thing, and there just didn't appear to be a whole lot to this character. Her special ability is, of course, kind of it's called blinking, but it's kind of a teleportation type thing, which on paper is cool, because it would definitely allow you to close the distance between you and the survivor you're chasing. But the downside is every time you do it, it causes you to wheeze and cough, and it kind of stuns you, which of course may cause you to lose sight of your survivor. And there just wasn't anything memorable about this particular character for me. So that's why the nurse is on the bottom of this list for me. Now, if you're somebody that happens to adore the nurse, maybe she's your favorite type of killer in the game, have no fear, because we have nowhere to go but up from this point on. So I apologize if you're a nurse fan, but I am not. Which brings us to number 5, and I don't think this is going to be any surprise based on what I just said about the nurse, but number 5 is the Wraith. And the Wraith works along the same, vein as the nurse. He's a very light character, and stuff, and I think his ability is cool on paper also. It's invisibility, which is kind of neat because the survivors can't really see you. But the drawback there is that you can't attack while you're invisible. You can only kind of watch and follow the survivors. So if you want to reach out and attack them, you have to go through the transformation back into a visible form, which makes a noise, which alerts the survivors that you're nearby. And he's just a very stealthy type character, which isn't the way that I prefer to play the game. But I think the major drawback of the Wraith for me personally is that he doesn't really have any defensive play amongst him when it comes to defending the people that you put up on the hooks, and this lack of a defense from people running up on the hooks and rescuing their teammates led me to kind of camp the hook, which a lot of people didn't like, but that was the way that I discovered works for me playing the Wraith. But like I said, I think he's just overall a stealthy character, and I just don't care to play that way, which is why he is number 5 on this list. Number 4 is the Shape, or we'll call him for what he is, Michael Myers. Now this one kind of surprised me a little bit. I honestly thought that when I got to him, he would have been higher up on the list, and overall, I really did enjoy the time that I spent with this character. He works how you would imagine Michael Myers would work in this type of situation. And I did find his special power to be very, very useful. His special power, if you don't know, is Stalker Sense, which allows you to, once you find a survivor, it kind of allows you to track them so you can see if they're hiding behind something, see where they go, and that kind of thing. Which for me, being blind as I am, I found very useful, because a lot of the trouble that I had with the game is losing track of people that I was chasing. They tend to blend in with the background, and I lose track of them relatively easy if I don't, stay right on them. And that might be a bit of a personal problem with my vision or whatever, but I found that this ability definitely compensated for that, and I wish every killer in the game kind of had this ability, because it was very nice. The one drawback that I found with Michael Myers is his weapon, which is kind of like a steak knife or butcher knife or something, like that big old kitchen knife, which of course is fitting, because when you imagine Michael Myers, I imagine that you would envision him running around with that type of knife. So hey, it works. But the range of the weapon is pretty bad. In order to down a survivor or injure a survivor, I found myself having to be right on his heels or right up close, and I missed plenty of opportunities to down people because I took swings before I was in range to do so, which ends up to be kind of tedious. But Michael Myers isn't an awful character to play as. I definitely think his ability kind of compensates for his kind of mediocre weapon, if you will, and that's why he's kind of in the middle of this list at number 4. Now, number 3 was kind of a surprise. I didn't expect to like this character as much as I did. I actually imagined her to be at the bottom of the list, but nevertheless, number 3 is the Hague. Now she is what you could probably picture as kind of the best of both worlds. She's a little stealthy, a little brutish, but her gameplay really isn't what drew me to her. I think what drew me to her and made me like her as much as I did is just the overall presence that she carries. Instead of walking around on 2 feet or floating like the Wraith and the Nurse do, she kind of she's very primal. She kind of crawls around like Gollum would, or something like that. And it just makes for a very interesting creature to play as. You know, her weapon is her hand and her fingernails, and it just, I liked that kind of character. I don't know why, but the Hague was very fun to play as. The downfall of the Hague for me, I think, came from me personally. I don't think I played her properly. She uses traps, which right off the bat I liked, because I find traps very, very useful in this game, as you will discover with our next participant in this list. But her traps didn't really do what I expected them to do. You know, I put them down in front of a hook thinking that they were going to capture the rescuer or stop them dead in their tracks. And all they do is basically when a survivor steps on them, it basically creates a jump scare of a hologram that shoots up from the ground of the Hague, and you freak out and whatever, which probably did work. You know, I couldn't hear the survivors that I was playing with scream or anything like that, because I didn't have a headset or anything. But in terms of gameplay, it really didn't do anything to the survivor themselves as far as hindering them or stunning them or anything. So, you know, I'm gonna chalk my shortcomings with the Hague up to inexperience and maybe me not using her correctly. But nevertheless, I did really appreciate the Hague. Which brings us to number 2, of course, the Trapper. Now, the Trapper is the one that I spent the most time with. Because I really liked him. You know, he gives me everything that I wanted in this type of game. He's the perfect killer in this scenario. You know, he's big, he's burly, he feels like he packs a punch. But the main attraction for me to the Trapper was, of course, no pun intended, the traps. They were very useful to, you know, spread around the map in the tall grass, and the way that I used them was to, you know, put them all around in the tall grass of the map and hope that somebody would step in them, which of course would alert me. And let me tell you, there's something satisfying about stalking somebody that is bleeding and caught in one of your bear traps. I got some kind of sick pleasure out of that type of gameplay. Why? I don't know. But I definitely got used to having traps like that, because the Trapper was actually the first killer that I played as, so I got really used to having bear traps, and then making that adjustment from the Trapper to other killers that don't have traps was a real adjustment. But it left very, very fond gameplay experiences for me, which is why the Trapper is number 2, which of course leads me to number 1. I'm going to do a little bit of a recap in case you, I don't know, fast forwarded or something. But number 6 on this list, and my least favorite killer of Dead by Daylight, would be the Nurse. Number 5 would be the Wraith. Number 4, the Shape, or Michael Myers. Number 3, the Hague. And number 2, the Trapper. So number 1 is, if you know the game at all, you already know what I'm going to say, the Hillbilly. And there's really not a whole lot to the Hillbilly. He's a very simplistic character. He doesn't use traps or invisibility or anything like that. He's just a guy that runs around the level with a hammer, and he busts you over the head with it, and that's his game. And his special power, or his character specific ability, is actually what made me fall in love with the Hillbilly instantly, because his special ability is nothing fancy. His special ability is just a chainsaw. So basically, the Hillbilly gives you a character that dual wields weapons to a point. He does use two hands when you call upon the chainsaw, but he's got a really beefy hammer in one hand and a chainsaw in the other. And there's just something satisfying about being a deranged serial killer that dual wields weapons. And I'm sure as a survivor, it's relatively terrifying to hear a chainsaw and then turn around and see it come at you when you're not expecting it. And that's basically why I love the Hillbilly. Is he's just very simple, but oddly satisfying to play as for me. As far as a drawback, I can't really say a whole lot negative about the character, minus maybe me missing a lot using the chainsaw, and people kind of, survivors kind of dodging me and stuff like that, which kind of got annoying. But as far as gameplay, there's really not a whole lot to critique for me. He was just a very enjoyable, brutish, in-your-face, dual-wielding serial killer. And that's why I love him, and he's my favorite serial killer in the game. So again, quick little recap here. Number 6, and my least favorite serial killer in Dead by Daylight would be the Nurse. Number 5, the Wraith. Number 4, Michael Myers. Number 3, the Hague. Number 2, the Trapper. And number 1, and my most favorite killer in Dead by Daylight, the Hillbilly. So with that, that's going to wrap up this quick little, well, not so quick now, because we're almost at 20 minutes, but this Dead by Daylight countdown. So until next time, guys, as always, I salute you, and remember, we're all mad here.